Nigel, what is your take on the way the customer is wanting to do his or her shopping today?
Our view as a retailer, and I suspect this would be shared by many other retailers, is there absolutely are some long-term trends here at work which are potentially being exacerbated by some of the current economic crisis, by things like the rise of online, etc. It all, to me, comes down in a very simplistic retailer sense as consumers' ways of shopping, what they're trying to do, what experience they want. And they have, I think, over the last few years, had a lot more choice. So what I think we're seeing is a realignment around shopping experiences and sophisticated consumer desires. And actually the easy bit of the solution here is what we need to build, which is getting into the customer's mind about what do they want out of each location type. It's then pretty easy to say, when we understand what they want, what do we need to build? I think the harder bit, the much harder bit, is the how. How do we get people to all align and make that happen, whether that is landlords, whether it's finance, whether it's councils, whether it's the role that retailers and entertainers can play in that.
Richard, can you offer the customer that experience in a smaller centre?
No, you absolutely can't offer the same experience, and I don't think we should be aiming to offer the same experience. Smaller towns have to find their place in the shopping hierarchy, and increasingly going forward, that place is going to have to be thought through very, very carefully, because it can't just be a general shopping experience based on fashion. Because I think there has been a perfect storm, and I think there's been a permanent change. And one of the biggest impacts of the internet has been to reduce margins for retailers, or to reduce the potential for margin and make life just very much more competitive. And I think we've seen lots of very high-profile retail failures. Interestingly, they were across the board. I think there were between 40 and 50 failures at Bluewater. But what we haven't seen publicised is all the hundreds and hundreds of independent retailers that have disappeared off the streets of smaller towns, and that's why the vacancy rates are so high. And it's very difficult to see how they will come back in the current in the current environment, because it's just too expensive for them to start up, and their margins are just not high enough.
Jonathan, what's been your experience in and around Edinburgh in relation to the smaller independent retailers? How have they been faring?
I think from our point of view in Edinburgh, it's been very much a case of understanding the mix of those retailers, because yes, there's been a lot of casualties, but it's understanding, is it because of over-competition between similar retailers in one area? Is it just a lack of complementarity, or is it something more to do with access and parking and all the usual things that councils get accused of making bad decisions on?
We're all familiar with the impact the internet has had on book retailing, home entertainment, obviously in the food sector. I guess the jury is out on fashion, Nigel. That's the really big concern. Is fashion going to go more and more on the internet?
I think fashion has been a relatively late starter on the whole. But certainly from our perspective, it's something we look at as a huge positive. We absolutely see this as a huge multi-channel opportunity. And I think that's the key bit there for us, is around making the most of the online, the internet, mobile channels alongside our stores to, yet again, go back to, let's start with the customer, enhance the customer experience.
Jonathan, let's come on to the role and the involvement of local government, certainly, possibly central government. How do you see your organisation and Richard's, for example, working together in some form of public-private partnership or initiative?
I think public-private is something that we've been championing for quite some time, and it is working, albeit, again, it's been one of these things that's taken a while to build up the trust. And I think the reason for that is because traditionally, cities, governments, whether they be local or central, tend to have a plan for a while, and then they have a better plan and they move on. And what that leaves behind is uncertainty and a lack of clarity. So our plan has been to stick to the approved plan, to have an idea as to where we're trying to go, and give confidence to people like Richard and others in that sector that this is where we want to go. Tell us how we can meet those needs, looking at financial tools like tax increment finance, which Edinburgh at the moment are in the lead. We'll have the first TIF in the UK.
You've been awarded the first TIF,
yes,
haven't you?
Yes, so we'll be using that around
the port scheme.
Yes, the waterfront area. Is there a way of using TIF more? Can we start to look at other revenue streams that the council can create or influence? Because I think at the moment there is not a chance that there's going to be any money coming out of local or central governments to help in any way, shape or form. It's just not there. But there are other incentives, there are other ways of working to take some of the uncertainty out of investments over a period of time that then gives that certainty to investors.
The TIF, of course, doesn't require any public sector investment. It requires you to forego your rating income for many years.
It depends. I mean, we could do it through prudential borrowing. We can borrow money down from the central government and we can put money in.
The public body will be the borrower?
Yes.
Not the private sector owner or developer?
Well, it depends. It can be either, it can be a partnership. It doesn't really matter. It's, at the end of the day, it's an area that is zoned by central government to local government to capture 1% of the business rate within that red line. And then that can be invested upon.
Richard, do you want to talk about TIFs?
No, not really. But
you must be in for one or two.
We'll be doing the second TIF in Glasgow. So yeah, TIFs I think are very important. Although we do have to be careful that we don't suddenly provide a lot of finance for schemes which are not sustainable. So that the care needs to be taken on TIFs. But what I would say is that local authorities have to show leadership in this. They have to get into partnership. I'm going to go back to our little example of Livingston. West Lothian Council have twice been voted the best local authority in the UK in the last 10 years. We've had a great partnership with them. We know where they want to take the town. We got planning permission once for a 300,000 square foot extension to the centre in 28 days. And they're absolutely supportive and behind the expansion of the town and the improvement of the town. And I know that's not possible in a historic centre like Edinburgh, but local authorities have to show leadership and actually make things happen to address these issues.
Richard, have we got the balance right in secondary centres in terms of parking, pricing policy, public transport, accessibility, the use of the private car?
No, absolutely not. I think there's a real risk that with the financial squeeze on local authorities, they're going to look at parking charges as an opportunity to increase revenue, and that will just exacerbate the problem. Parking and accessibility needs to become easier in these smaller centres. And actually, I would just like to say one other thing. I've mentioned lease structures are being broken down, and that values in secondary centres are not going to be supported by lease structures in the future. They have to be supported by the trade of the retailers. And so we, as landlords, we need to know what the trade is in order to be able to value those centres. And if we look at it on that basis, then this whole issue of should we charge for car parking becomes a lot clearer, because it's going to impact on trade, and we can make a balanced judgment on that.